Welcome to the Festival of Dangerous Ideas podcast. Our 10th festival, like thousands of other events, was no longer able to proceed due to the rapidly evolving situation around COVID-19. While our 10th anniversary is postponed, we have 9 years of stimulating dangerous ideas in the archive to ponder, reminding us of the eerily relevant conversations that take place at the festival each year. There are definitely two Americas. The viable America where there is a plausible future for the people born into it, and about 20 blocks away, there is another America entirely. So says journalist and creator of the Wire and Treme, David Simon, in his talk, Some People Are More Equal Than Others. In this popular keynote, the notion that socialism needs to be married to capitalism in order for society to reverse the damaging effects of the current world are explored. Please enjoy, from the Festival of Dangerous Ideas 2014, David Simon.
My father, who passed away a few years ago, he had some very specific words for me. He said, "Kid, if you're ever invited to speak at the Sydney Opera House, for God's sakes, wear a tie and a jacket and some sensible shoes, not sneakers. And don't curse. Don't curse like you always curse. You're not in the newsroom anymore. Talk right." Unfortunately, I'm under contract to HBO. So every 13th, 14th word has to be a profanity. So if you were hoping for a certain amount of decorum and dignity in this fine room, you're fucked. My title was chosen for me. I read it at some point when the materials were printed, and I thought, they gave me the ultimate betrayal line from Orwell, from Animal Farm, and the Porcine Poet Bureau's last twist of the knife. I assume they want me to speak to treat that sardonically, that I'm not going to be defending that notion of inequality, and I'm going to go that way. So if you were here to in the hopes of hearing certain members of our human tribe lauded over others, I'm going to ruin your evening. Yes, it is true that I come from a country that is now utterly schizophrenic when it comes to its society, its economy, its politics. There are definitely two Americas. I live on one block in Baltimore that is part of the viable America, the America that's connected to its own economy, where there is a plausible future for the people born into it. About 20 blocks away is another America entirely. It's astonishing how little we have to do with each other, and yet we live in such proximity. There's no barbed wire around West Baltimore or around East Baltimore or around Pimlico, the areas that are in my city that have been utterly divorced from the American experience that I know. But there might as well be. We've somehow managed to march on to two separate futures. And I think you're seeing this more and more in the West. I don't think it's unique to America. I think we've perfected a lot of the tragedy, and we're getting there faster than a lot of other places that maybe are a little more reasoned. But my dangerous idea, aside from the shoes, my dangerous idea kind of involves this fellow who got left by the wayside in the 20th century and seemed to be almost the butt end of the joke of the 20th century, named Karl Marx. I'm not a Marxist in the sense that I don't think Marxism has a very specific clinical answer to what ails us economically. I think he was a much better diagnostician than he was a clinician. He was good figuring out what was wrong or what could be wrong with capitalism if it wasn't attended to, and much less credible when it comes to how you might solve that. If you've read Capital or if you've got the Cliff Notes, you know that his imaginings of how classical Marxism, of how his logic would work when applied, kind of devolve into, such nonsense as the withering away of the state and platitudes like that. But he was really sharp about what goes wrong when capital wins, unequivocally, when it gets everything it asks for. That may be the ultimate tragedy of capitalism in our time, which is that it has achieved its dominance without regard to a social compact, without being connected to any other metric for human progress. We understand profit. In my country, we measure things by profit. We listen to the Wall Street analysts. They tell us what we're supposed to do every quarter. The quarterly report is God. Turn to face God. Turn to face Mecca. Did you make your number? Did you not make your number? Do you want your bonus? Do you not want your bonus? And that notion that the capital is the metric, the profit is the metric by which we're going to measure the health of our society is one of the fundamental mistakes of the last 30 years. It begins I would date it in my country to about 1980 exactly, and it has triumphed. And ultimately, the great, the farce of this argument that was seemingly where capitalism stomped the hell out of Marxism by the end of the 20th century and was predominant in all respects. The great irony of it is that the only thing that actually works is non-ideological, is impure, has elements of both arguments, and never actually achieves any kind of partisan or philosophical perfection. It's pragmatic. It includes the best aspects of socialistic thought and of free market capitalism. And it works because we don't let it work entirely. And that's a hard idea, to think that there isn't one single silver bullet that gets us out of the mess we've dug for ourselves. But man, we've dug a mess. If you think that at World War II, the West emerged with the American economy coming out of its wartime extravagance, its power, that it emerged as the best product. It was the best product. It worked the best. It was demonstrating its might, not only in terms of what it did during the war, but in terms of just how facile it was in creating mass wealth. Plus, it provided a lot more freedom, and it was doing the one thing that guaranteed the 20th century was going to be, as they say, forgive the jingoistic sound of this, but in the American century. It took a working class that had no discretionary income at the beginning of the century, that was working on subsistence wages, and it made it into a consumer class that had not only money to buy all the stuff that they needed to live, but to buy a bunch of shit that they wanted that they didn't need. And that was the engine that drove us. It wasn't just that we could supply stuff or that we had the factories or know-how or capital. It was that we had created our own demand. And then we started exporting that demand throughout the West. And the standard of living made it possible to manufacture stuff at an incredible rate and sell it. And how did we do that? We did that by not giving in to either side. That was the New Deal. That was the Great Society. That was all of that argument about collective bargaining and union wages and it was an argument that said basically neither side gets to win. Labor doesn't get to win all its arguments. Capital doesn't get to. But it's in the tension, it's in the actual fight between the two that capitalism actually becomes functional, that it becomes something that every strata in society has a stake in, that they all share. The unions actually mattered. The unions were part of the equation. It didn't matter that they won all the time. It didn't matter that they lost all the time. It just mattered that they had to win some of the time and they had to put up a fight and they had to argue for the demand end of the equation. and for the idea that workers were not worth less, they were worth more. And ultimately, we abandoned that. And we believed in the idea of trickle down and the idea of the market economy, and the market knows best, to the point where now libertarianism in my country is actually being taken seriously as an intelligent mode of political thought. It's astonishing to me. But it is. People are saying, I don't need anything but my own ability to earn a profit. I'm not connected to society. I don't care how the road got built. I don't care where the firefighter comes from. I don't care who educates the kids other than my kids. I am me. It's the triumph of the self. I am me, hear me roar. That we've gotten to this point is astonishing to me, because basically in winning its victories, so in seeing that wall come down and seeing the former Stalinist states journey towards our way of thinking in terms of markets or be vulnerable, you would have thought that we would have learned what works. And instead, we've descended into what can only be described as greed. This is just greed. This is an inability to see that we're all connected. That the idea of two Americas is implausible as far as it goes, or two Australias, or two Spains, or two Frances. Societies are exactly what they sound like. If everybody is invested in it, if everyone doesn't believe that they have it doesn't mean everybody's going to get the same amount. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be people who are the venture capitalists who stand to make the most. It doesn't matter, it doesn't suggest that, to each according to their needs or anything that is purely Marxist, but it does say that everybody feels as if the society succeeds, I succeed. I don't get left behind. And there isn't a society in the West right now that is able to sustain that for all of its population. And so in my country, you're seeing a horror show. You're seeing a retrenchment in terms of family income. You're seeing the abandonment of basic services such as public education, functional public education. You're seeing the underclass hunted through a war on dangerous drugs, allegedly, that is in fact merely a war on the poor, and has turned us into the most incarcerative state in the history of mankind at this point, in terms of just the sheer numbers of people we've put in American prisons, and the sheer numbers of the percentage of Americans we've put into prisons. No other country on the face of the earth jails people at the number and rate that we are. We have become something other than what we claim for the American dream. And all because of our inability to basically share, to even contemplate a socialist impulse. Socialism is a dirty word in my country. I have to give that disclaimer at the beginning of every speech. Oh, by the way, I'm not a Marxist. I lived through the 20th century. I don't believe that a state-run economy can be as viable as market capitalism in producing mass wealth. I don't. I'm utterly committed to the idea of capitalism has to be the way we generate mass wealth in the coming century. That argument's over. But the idea that it's not going to be married to a social compact, that how you distribute the benefits of capitalism isn't going to include everyone in the society to a reasonable extent, that's astonishing to me. And from that, capitalism is about to seize defeat from the jaws of victory all by its own hand. All by its own hand. That's the astonishing end of this story, unless we reverse course. And unless we take into consideration, if not the remedies of Marx, then the diagnosis. Because he saw what would happen if capital triumphed unequivocally, if it got everything it wanted. And one of the things that capital would want unequivocally, and for certain, is they would want labor to be diminished. They would want labor to be diminished because labor is a cost. And if labor is diminished, let's translate that in human terms. It means human beings are worth less. From this moment forward, unless we reverse course, all of us speaking in terms of the average person. If we're represented by the average person, the average human being is worth less on planet Earth. From this moment forward, unless we take stock of the fact that maybe socialism and the socialist impulse has to be addressed again. It has to be married as it was married in the 30s and in the 40s and even into the 50s to the engine that is capitalism. Mistaking capitalism for a blueprint as to how to build a society, I think, to me, it strikes me as the really dangerous idea in a bad way. Capitalism is a remarkable engine, again, for producing wealth. It's a great tool to have in your toolbox if you're trying to build a society and have that society advance. You wouldn't want to go forward at this point without it. But it's not a blueprint for how you build a just society. There are other metrics besides that quarterly profit report that we have suggested that the market will solve such things as environmental concerns, as our racial divides, as our class distinctions, as the problems with educating and incorporating one generation of workers into the economy after another when that economy is changing. The idea that it's going to heed all of the human concerns and still maximize profit is juvenile. That's a juvenile notion. And it's still being argued in my country, passionately. And we're going down the tubes. And it terrifies me because I'm astonished at how comfortable we are absolving ourselves of what is basically a moral choice. Are we all in this together or are we all not? Well, that if you watched the debacle that was and is the fight over something as basic as public health policy in my country over the last couple of years, culminating in this last bit of hilarity in the Congress, you have to be a little bit in awe that we might ever actually, imagine the ineffectiveness that Americans are going to offer the world when it comes to something really complicated like global warming. We can't even get health care for our citizens on a basic level. And the argument comes down to, God damn this socialist president. Does he think I'm going to pay to keep other people healthy? That's socialism. HBO contract. Motherfucker. What do you think group health insurance is? Do you have, you ask these guys, do you have group health insurance where oh yeah, I got, my law firm, okay, you got group health, so when you get sick, you're able to afford the treatment comes because you have enough people in your law firm that you're able to get health insurance, enough of them stay healthy, so the actuarial tables work. And all of you, when you do get sick, are able to have the resources there to get better. Because you're relying on the idea of the group. Yeah, and they nod their heads and you go, brother, that's socialism. It is. If socialism is the taint you can't abide by, then get your checkbook out, write a check to the hospital, write a check to the doctor, and shut the fuck up. And the fact that this is actually a semantic argument, when you say, okay, we're going to do what we're doing for your law firm, but we're going to do it for 300 million Americans. And we're going to make it affordable for everybody that way. And yes, it means that you're going to be paying for the other guys in the society the same way you pay for the other guys in the law firm. Their eyes glaze. They don't want to hear it. It's too much to contemplate the idea that that the whole country might be actually connected. So I'm astonished that at this late date, I'm standing here and I'm saying, we might want to go back for this guy Marx that we were laughing at. If not for his prescriptions, no, I don't see a state-run economy being viable ever again, then at least for his depiction of what is possible if you don't mitigate the authority of capitalism, if you don't embrace some other values for human endeavor. that's got to be something that we leave behind forever. The notion that this tool is more than what it is. And that's what The Wire was about, basically. It was about people who were worth less and who were no longer necessary, as maybe 10 or 15% of my country is no longer necessary to the operation of the economy. It was about them trying to solve, for lack of a better term, an existential crisis. In their irrelevance, their economic irrelevance, they were nonetheless still on the ground, occupying this place called Baltimore. And they were going to have to endure somehow. And that's the great horror show, is what are we going to do with all these people that we've managed to marginalize? It's kind of interesting when it was only race. You know, when you could do this on the basis of people's racial fears. And it was just the black and brown people in American cities who had the higher rates of unemployment and the higher rates of addiction and were marginalized, and who had the shitty school systems and the lack of opportunity. Kind of interesting in this last recession to see the economy shrug and start to throw white middle-class people into the same boat so that they became vulnerable to the drug war, say, from methamphetamine, or they became unable to qualify for college loans, or they became, their unemployment started running out. And all of a sudden, a certain faith in the economic engine and in the economic authority of Wall Street and of the market logic started to fall away from people. And they realized, you know, it's not just about race. It's about something even more terrifying. It's about class. You know, are you at the top of the wave or are you at the bottom? And so, how does it get better? I mean, well, I think in 1932 it got better because they dealt the cards again, and there was a communal logic that said, nobody's going to get left behind. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get the banks open. You know, from the depths of that depression, certain social compact was made between labor and capital that actually allowed people to have some hope. We're either going to do that in some practical way when things get bad enough and start walking back the last 30 years, or we're going to keep going the way we're going, at which point there's going to be enough people standing on the outside of this mess that somebody's going to pick up a brick. Because, you know, when people get to the end, there's always the brick. I hope we go for the first, but I'm losing faith. The other thing that was there in 1932 that isn't there now is, in 1932, some element of the popular will could be expressed through the electoral process in my country. The last job of capitalism, having won all the battles against labor, having acquired the ultimate authority, almost the ultimate moral authority over what's a good idea or what's not, or what's valued and what's not, the last journey for capital in my country has been to buy the electoral process, the one venue for reform that remained to Americans. Citizens United, decisions such as that have basically, you know, in my country, everybody was very upset to hear that corporations were people. That part didn't bother me. You know, corporations are, under the law, people. That's why you incorporate, to give your company the legal standing of an individual. That's always been true under the law. No, the part of Citizens United that scared the shit out of me was money is speech. That was the part of the equation that I thought was incredibly dark and incredibly vile. And ultimately, right now, capital has effectively purchased the government. And you witnessed it, with the healthcare debacle, in terms of the $450 million that was heaved into Congress, the most broken part of my government, in order that the popular will never actually emerge in any of that legislative process. So I don't know what we do if we can't actually control the representative government that we claim will manifest the popular will. even if we all start having the same sentiments that I'm arguing for now, I'm not sure we can affect them anymore in the same way that we could at the rise of the Great Depression. So maybe it will be the brick, but I hope not. And on that happy note, because I like nothing more than to bring a room like this down, I guess we'll just go to questions, and you can all ask me about Omar, and But again, because I'm from Baltimore and I never leave a man behind. The shoes are from Dan Brothers on South Charles Street, two-tone wingtips, and they are what every righteous Baltimore numbers runner would have worn in 1955. So.
This session was recorded live at the Sydney Opera House and presented by the Sydney Opera House and the Ethics Centre. The Ethics Centre delivers programs and experiences designed to bring ethics to the centre of our life. We offer free counselling for individuals, consulting, leadership and development services. As a non-profit charity, we rely heavily on donations to continue our work, which can be made via our website.